She stood still as the syrupy liquid trickled down her face, soaking through her blouse, clinging to her skin like shame. The laughter around her echoed louder than the splash of the soda, bouncing off the sterile glass walls of the 28th floor. No one offered a napkin. No one flinched. They just laughed, like it was normal, like dignity was disposable. Jasmine Carter had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility. She didn't speak too loudly, didn't dress too boldly, didn't correct people when they butchered her name, because blending in, she believed, was safer than standing out. But now, in front of half the office, she was drenched in cold cola and something else. Realization. That silence wasn't safety. It was suffocation. The soda wasn't just cold. It was the world's reminder that some people still see dignity as a joke. Her eyes locked onto the woman who did it. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She reached for her phone with trembling hands, whispered one line, and only one. It's time. Around her, the tower of steel and glass remained indifferent, reflecting the city and its cruelty back at itself. But Jasmine had changed. Something in her had quietly shifted. And before we dive in, drop your location in the comments below, because what happened next? It could happen anywhere. Jasmine Carter moved through the office like a quiet thought, soft in a world built for noise. Every step she took seemed deliberate, her presence always just enough to be polite, but never enough to disrupt. A soft-spoken, sharp-minded black woman in a high-rise of sharp elbows and louder voices, she spent most of her days folding herself into the silence. Not out of fear, but strategy. Her brilliance in data analytics was undeniable, but in meetings, her words were few. She let her work speak louder than any pitch. Still, the silence around her grew louder with time. Missed greetings in the hallway, birthday lunches she never knew about, laughter that stopped when she walked into the break room. Every lunch, she sat alone by the window, eyes scanning spreadsheets, pretending the glass between her and the city made her feel part of something bigger. But inside, the quiet was becoming heavy. Vanessa Liu, on the other hand, was a force of charm, bubbly, clever, effortlessly adored. She floated between cubicles like a queen in a modern court, always smiling, always complimenting, always in control. But behind that polished charisma was a need to dominate, to remind others of their place through whispers dressed as jokes. "We're just joking," she often said, brushing off Jasmine's discomfort after casually mocking her thrift store heels or mispronouncing her name for the third time in a week. Jasmine never responded. She didn't argue, didn't defend. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was restraint. She'd learned long ago that in some rooms, truth only makes things worse. The office itself mirrored Vanessa, shiny, towering, and suffocatingly white. Polished surfaces reflected power, but never warmth. It was a place of ambition, yes, but for Jasmine, it was a place that constantly asked her to shrink. She began journaling during those silent lunches. Just a few lines at first, observations, questions, prayers. But slowly, the pages became bolder, more honest. She wrote about her dreams, her rage, her loneliness. She never mentioned his full name in the journal, just Dom, a code, a comfort. No one in the office knew much about her personal life, and she preferred it that way. To them, she was just Jasmine, the quiet analyst who smiled too little and stayed too late. But in those pages, and in the silent strength she carried, something was beginning to crack open. The world hadn't seen her yet, but Dom had, and soon they all would. Jasmine began to shrink inside herself, one quiet day at a time. At first, it was subtle, An eye roll here, a shared glance between colleagues when she spoke up during meetings, unanswered emails that mysteriously didn't make the thread. She tried to push past it, to chalk it up to office culture, maybe even her own paranoia. But the weight grew heavier, pressing down on her every time her name was accidentally left off the team photo list or when her lunch mysteriously vanished from the shared fridge. She felt it most during the moments she sat alone at her desk while others gathered in huddles that dissolved as she approached. It's just how things are, she told herself. Stay calm, keep your head down. But every laugh at her expense felt like paper cuts on her pride. Small, constant, quietly bleeding her dry. Vanessa, always with that sparkling grin, took it a step further. Her jokes weren't jokes at all. They were rehearsed performances, carefully designed to make Jasmine feel small, while giving others permission to laugh. "You're so serious all the time," Vanessa would say with a smirk. "Smile, girl. This isn't church." Jasmine never replied. She just smiled, thin and tight, and let the moment pass. But each time something inside her curled a little tighter. She stopped offering suggestions, stopped making eye contact, started to suppress the natural instinct to lead, to question, to shine. Survival meant being invisible, and so she wrapped herself in silence like armor. The prank was planned under the guise of birthday fun. Vanessa led the effort with mock enthusiasm, roping in interns and assistants to help with decorations and office surprises. Jasmine had no idea it was coming. She walked into the break room with a file in hand, expecting nothing more than an awkward cupcake moment. Instead, she was met with smirks, phones held low, ready to record. And then it happened. A cold splash, a hiss of carbonation, the contents of a can of Coca Cola spilled over her blouse, her hair, her papers. She froze. The room burst into laughter. Someone clapped. Someone else said, "Oh my God, Vanessa, you're crazy." Jasmine stood still, her chest rising and falling slowly. The soda clung to her like insult. Sweet on the outside, sticky and staining underneath. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From restraint. Vanessa stepped back, mock gasping, "Oh, come on, it's just Coke. Don't be so sensitive." That line landed like a slap, louder than the splash itself. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She breathed, slowly, deeply. Then, without looking at anyone, she pulled her phone from her pocket, turned away from the break room, and stepped into the hallway. Her voice, low and steady, traveled through the phone. It happened. That's all she said. She didn't need to say more. The one person who needed to hear it would understand. Inside the break room, the laughter resumed, quieter now, but still there, nervous, gleeful, ignorant. But it didn't matter, because while their voices filled the room, it was Jasmine's silence that would echo the longest. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the office just before 9. Her hair was neat, her blouse crisp, her stride steady. There were no traces of the humiliation she had endured the day before. No stickiness, no stains, no hesitation. She walked in dry, but something about her seemed newly weathered, as if she'd passed through a fire and come out refined. She didn't stop to greet anyone, didn't glance at Vanessa or her circle. She simply moved through the office with the quiet gravity of someone who had nothing left to prove. The air itself felt tense, like glass about to crack. The laughter that had once flowed freely now hung suspended, brittle and uncertain. No one knew he was coming. Not until the black car pulled up to the front entrance and 3 suited men stepped out. The one in the middle didn't wear a badge or carry a briefcase. He didn't need to. Dominic Carter's presence alone was enough. Tall, composed, dressed in a tailored gray suit, he moved through the glass doors like he owned the building, because he did. Yet few people had ever seen him in person. Most had only heard whispers of the silent investor, a man who rarely involved himself in daily operations. Until now. He didn't raise his voice when he entered. He didn't have to. The room stilled around him. Phones were lowered. Feet shuffled awkwardly. Vanessa's lips parted to greet him, but no words came out. Dominic walked straight to the conference room, the same room where Jasmine had once stood awkwardly in the background, unseen, unheard. He placed a black folder on the table and looked around. The tension grew with every quiet second he didn't speak. Finally, he said, calm and cool as stone, "I saw everything." The words dropped like a gavel. Jasmine stepped into the room behind him, her expression unreadable but unmistakably poised. She didn't flinch, didn't avoid eyes. She simply took her place beside him, no longer a shadow but an equal. Vanessa opened her mouth, perhaps to explain, perhaps to deflect, but Dominic held up a hand, and the room fell quiet again. "I watched that video more than once," he said. "And I listened to your voices, laughing while she stood there, soaked in what you thought was a joke." His gaze moved from face to face. No one dared to meet his eyes. Jasmine spoke, her voice steady, smooth. "I'm not the one who needs to speak today." Dominic turned to her, pulling a sleek black pen from his inner jacket pocket and placing it on the table. It gleamed under the overhead light, not as a writing tool but as a symbol, a quiet weapon. This wasn't a pen for signing checks. It was the one he used for terminations, final decisions, irreversible lines drawn. Vanessa, pale now, stepped forward. "We didn't mean. It was just a team thing." "You humiliated her," Dominic interrupted, his tone still calm, which somehow made it worse. "You mocked her, excluded her, and then tried to wash it all off as culture." There was a silence that pressed into the walls, into every breath held in the room. Dominic looked at Jasmine. "What do you want to do?" She didn't hesitate. Her voice was even, almost gentle. "Fire them." He nodded. "Done." And just like that, it was over for them. No yelling, no chaos. Just the cold, quiet consequence of cruelty exposed. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't smile. She just stood still, like a woman who had finally stepped into her power. The boardroom had never felt quieter. Every eye flicked between Dominic and the folder he laid open on the polished table. Its contents carefully arranged. Printed transcripts, surveillance stills, copies of internal messages. Jasmine hadn't seen them before either. As Dominic began flipping through each piece, she realized something that made her breath catch. Not only had he believed her without hesitation, he'd been quietly watching long before she ever called. He didn't just build empires, she thought, heart thudding. He protected them from shadows too. He hadn't stepped in with loud declarations or public defenses. He had observed, gathered, and waited, until the truth could speak louder than any voice. With the calm of a man used to commanding silence, Dominic tapped on one image. A screenshot from a hidden security feed in the break room showing Vanessa tilting the soda can, frozen mid-pour. Another click. An email thread surfaced on the screen behind him, where Vanessa mocked Jasmine's Ice Queen energy to a group of colleagues. Their laughter had turned into stillness. One by one, faces dropped. And then came the final blow. A voice memo. Vanessa's own voice crackled through the speaker, laughing about how it was worth it just to see the look on her face. Vanessa's smirk evaporated. Her hands, once confidently folded, now trembled as she clutched her tablet like a lifeline. "I didn't know," she stammered, stepping forward, panic rising like heat. Dominic didn't flinch. "You thought this company was yours?" he asked, voice razor-sharp but quiet. "That was your first mistake." He turned to Jasmine, not to explain, but to center her. He let her see the full extent of the web he'd untangled on her behalf. She stood there in silence, not because she was shocked, but because she was seen, completely, for the first time in that place. The ID badge Vanessa had worn like armor was removed by security within seconds. That laminated card, once symbolic of status and control, now dangled uselessly in a gloved hand. For Jasmine, something shifted deep inside. She wasn't the girl who swallowed her voice anymore. She wasn't the woman who endured to keep peace. She was something else now, a catalyst. Her pain had become the spark that revealed everything rotten beneath the surface. And as Vanessa was led out, and the others who had enabled her shrank in their chairs, Jasmine didn't feel vindictive. She felt clear. The prank had been designed to humiliate her, but instead, it had revealed the truth about them. And justice. Justice hit harder. In the days that followed, the office felt like a different place, not because of fear, but because something fundamental had shifted. The laughter was quieter now, more thoughtful. Meetings started on time. People looked each other in the eyes again. The prank, once whispered about in glee, was now a point of shame, a collective regret. Jasmine received an official offer within a week, a promotion to senior project director, complete with bonuses, a new office, and more authority than ever. But when she sat across from the HR director, hands folded in her lap, her response surprised everyone. "I don't want power," she said softly. "I want peace." The woman across from her, a seasoned executive who had seen the company through mergers and rebrands, nodded with something close to admiration. "You already have both," she replied. And Jasmine knew then what she truly needed to do. She declined the title, but asked for something else. A new position, newly created, head of employee wellness and inclusion. She didn't want to sit at the top of the hierarchy. She wanted to stand at the heart of the culture and change it from within. She didn't want a throne. She wanted healing in the halls. The request raised eyebrows, but Dominic supported her fully, and within days, a department was built around her vision. On Monday morning, Jasmine walked through the same break room where the soda had once soaked her skin. But this time, the room was still, quiet in a way that wasn't empty, but reverent. Heads lifted. Eyes met hers. No one laughed. No one looked away. A few people who had once clapped or filmed or said nothing, approached her with apologies. Not rehearsed ones to save face, but quiet, trembling confessions spoken from a place of true remorse. She listened. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she said nothing at all, because sometimes silence was mercy too. Outside the conference room, a new wall plaque had been mounted. It read simply, "Respect is policy." It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The message was clear, permanent, and placed where everyone could see it every day. Jasmine didn't become a boss that week. She became something more. She became a symbol of quiet transformation, the kind that doesn't shout, but still shakes foundations. She began organizing weekly listening sessions for staff. She rewrote onboarding materials to include dignity-centered culture codes. She worked with HR to create anonymous channels for grievances, so no one else would feel voiceless the way she once did. Her story went viral not because of the revenge, but because of the restraint. People didn't share the video to mock anymore. They shared it to remind each other what dignity looked like in the face of cruelty. She didn't fire to punish, she fired to reset. And in doing so, Jasmine Carter didn't just change a workplace. She changed the rhythm of how power could move, soft, steady, and strong enough to echo through walls that once ignored her voice. Jasmine stood before her mirror in the soft morning light, adjusting her earrings with deliberate grace. Her reflection looked back at her, not just composed, but whole. There was no fear behind her eyes now, no question of belonging. For the first time in years, she smiled at the woman staring back, not out of politeness, but out of recognition. Her strength, long buried beneath silence, had finally surfaced. In the drawer beside her stood a folded blouse, the same one she'd worn that day. Stained once with Coca Cola and shame, it had been washed and preserved, not as a keepsake of pain, but as a symbol of power reclaimed. Sometimes silence is louder than thunder, and sometimes it's justice. She closed the drawer gently, letting the stillness wrap around her like peace. No more pretending, no more shrinking. Jasmine Carter had found her voice not through shouting, but by standing still when it mattered most. Would you have stayed silent or spoken like Jasmine? Because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting to remember who they are. If this story moved you, share it with them. Remind them that quiet power is still power. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think everyone deserves a second chance? And don't forget to follow, because next time we'll bring you another story where dignity rises, not in anger, but in grace.